Good day to everybody out there. Therapy time. I miss my friends from the East Coast. I like a lot. Yes, I miss my Minnesota friends, but this is just so much more fresh, you know? Alrighty, therapy check. Shall we? In case you missed the last episode, no worries. Today's tale is eerily similar in both tragic events and obsessive frustrations. Yet another cold case that had more than a chance of getting solved. This is the unsolved murder of Delisa Kelley. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from Uncovered.com, where I originally saw her story, a few articles from WFAA.com, and the rest I will list down below. Real quickly, if you don't mind, Uncovered.com is a beautiful website and source. Over 50,000 unsolved cases are discussed, mapped, and categorized throughout their website. Their goal or message is, quote, to use the community to uncover answers and bring hope to the families of the murdered or missing. We are building a software platform to combine data, analytics, and the wisdom of the community to help solve the cold cases of these people. We can help reduce the burden for law enforcement, use our collective impact and success of the platform to influence public policy, and ultimately start getting wrongful murder convictions overturned and cold cases solved. End quote. I could continue to talk about their work and the community they've created over there, but I suggest you check it out yourself if that interests you. Okie dokie. Delisa Kelley, a young 24-year-old mother with another on the way, had her entire life ahead of her. Friends of Delisa knew her for her affectionate laugh and loving bond with her young son. One such friend of hers sadly passed away in early 2014, and the wake was being held on March 7th. As good friends do, Delisa wanted to attend. Around 4:30 p.m. on March 7th, she left her grandmother's house in Oak Cliff, a southwest suburb of Dallas, Texas, looking for someone to give her a lift. Now, I don't know her or her grandmother's or her mother's car situation, but this appears to be a semi-regular habit, or at least not an abnormal occurrence to hitchhike, essentially. Around 6:30 p.m. that evening, Delisa's sister Jasmine received a chilling phone call. According to Project Cold Case, quote, Jasmine overheard Delisa screaming, "Stop! Stop! Get off of me!" A man was also heard saying, "Shut up! Stop screaming! You want to be hard-headed?" This phone call only lasted 1 minute and 11 seconds, and then nothing. Jasmine tried to call back multiple times to no avail. Most, if not all, sources that I've seen say that this phone call was accidental or a butt dial, essentially. But I don't think so. Why? Why don't I think so? Because Delisa never made it to her friend's wake. A butt dial at that precise moment to her sister of all contacts in her phone? That doesn't scream accident to me. Her sister Jasmine, now worried, reached out to her grandmother asking if she had heard anything from Delisa recently. All that she learned was that her sister left for that wake around 4:30 looking for a ride. At 7 p.m., roughly 15 minutes after the phone call, Jasmine received a text from Delisa's phone saying that she would, quote, call her soon. But that call never came. Again, the sources I use say that Delisa texted Jasmine, but I can guarantee you that that was not Delisa texting. It was somebody else. Buying time. There's no doubt in my mind that after that first frantic phone call, Delisa would have called her sister back, not texted. Without a clue as to what was happening to Delisa, the grandmother eventually called 911, describing the situation and what had just occurred. The phone call, the screaming, all of it. Quote, The 911 dispatcher took all the information and relayed it over to Sergeant Kevin Mansell, who can be heard in this 911 call not taking Delisa's case seriously, suggesting that because she was pregnant, she would leave the house frequently, end quote. And that's putting it nicely. I listened to this audio on YouTube, and you instantly know this Sergeant Kevin Mansell is a piece of shit. He literally laughs when confronted with this information. Thankfully, the dispatcher could hear the fear in the grandmother's voice, and they urged the sergeant to do something. So he never sent an officer, but he eventually tried to ping Delisa's cell phone, and when that didn't work, guess what he does? Nothing. Yep. After he attempted to ping her cell phone one time, he claims he, quote, forgot about it, not her, while doing other things. Again, piece of shit. A screaming, missing, pregnant woman, and he just forgets. So this all went down on Friday evening. And after more pleading from her family, their friends, and Delisa's boyfriend, an officer was finally sent to the grandmother's home on Monday to take a statement. And by Tuesday, the police department was like, okay, I guess we can canvass a neighborhood or two, but no rush or anything, guys. The police force, in their statements, called this a search, but it was no more than a handful of officers over a handful of hours. And I know for a fact that the Dallas police force and surrounding communities have a much stronger presence than that. The next quote-unquote searches they conducted on Wednesday involved calling hospitals and funeral homes. I mean, come on. First, you assume she left on her own accord because she's pregnant. I don't know how that makes sense, first of all. And now you're assuming she's dead? Where's the jump? Where's the connection? 7 days after her family last saw Delisa, they decided to organize their own search party. If the police wouldn't truly look for her, they would go out and do it themselves. Lysandra, Delisa's mother, told WFAA.com that as they were getting ready to go out and search, Jasmine called her and she said, quote, "Mom, are you sitting down?" Lysandra said, "Jasmine, just tell me." They found her. Lysandra said, "Okay, where is she?" And Jasmine said, "No, Mom, she's gone." Lysandra said it took all the air out of her body, her legs went weak, and she just fell to the ground and screamed. Her 24-year-old daughter's body was found in an abandoned house less than 2 miles from her grandmother's home. Detective Beverly Ma of the Dallas PD reported that her death was caused by blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. But what they said afterward shocked everyone. Quote, "Delisa died 3 days before her body was found, according to the autopsy. That means that there were 4 days after she disappeared that Delisa was most likely alive," end quote. Remember those early days when no officers were sent right after the phone call or the following days? And remember those measly searches they conducted in 1 or 2 neighborhoods and then decided to just call hospitals? They could have done so much more in that time. Okay, so this was reported to her family before an official identification had been made. Lysandra, desperate to confirm that it was in fact Delisa, rushed to the medical examiner's office asking to see her daughter. They turned her away. I know. So, instead of giving up, she described her daughter in vivid detail, and as soon as she reached the tattoos Delisa had on her hands, the ME said, "Yeah, that's your daughter." As for the investigation, now that the police actually care to do something, it was already 7 days behind. And let's just get this out of the way. Like I kind of previously mentioned, if Sergeant Mansell had done his job, there's a chance Delisa would still be alive today. If he had taken that call seriously like the dispatcher had, we might be in a different position. Anyway, investigators tracked Delisa from where she left at her grandmother's house to a stop-and-save convenient store/food market. Quote, Delisa is seen on surveillance video on March 7th at that convenience store. She's seen exiting the store before she enters a blue 1986 Mercury Grand Marquis. Police would later interview the driver of that car, but never publicly identified him as a suspect. End quote. That's another thing. They say they've interviewed him, but did they really? The police have already flashed their incompetence multiple times in this case. Who's to say they actually tracked this owner of the car down and did a thorough investigation to clear him? He is now officially the last person to have seen Delisa alive. They need to check him out more than, yeah, we interviewed him. Moving on, you know? Also, on top of that, she was seen getting into the car around 6:13 p.m., and she made that frantic phone call to her sister at 6:45 p.m. You're saying she got into this first car, drove off, got out, and found a second ride within 30 minutes, whereupon she was attacked? It just doesn't feel plausible. I need more information on this car owner. What did he say to police to make it so easy to believe he was not involved? For the next week, as you know, after she disappeared, we're left in the dark until her body was found at 10:30 a.m. 1 week after she vanished. According to Uncovered.com, quote, a South Central patrol officer notified the Youth Operations/Missing Person Department that a body had been located. When detectives arrived, they were able to confirm that the body matched the description of Delisa. The house where her body was discovered was abandoned. Her body was identified, and the case shifted to a homicide investigation. Delisa was severely beaten, strangled, her jaw was crushed, and she had wounds all over her face and head, end quote. And that's where they left the investigation. No additional news, tips, press releases, nothing in the years since this has happened. Well, I take that back. 8 years ago in 2016, they said they had new evidence that may lead to something in one article, but it never led to anything, so. But the police's, mainly Sergeant Mansell's, lack of awareness and caring resulted in the failure to solve this case, if not the failure to save a young woman's life. And her baby. However, there are two small silver linings in this case. Well, like 1.5. In 2019, quote, the Kelley alert was created after the family felt the response by law enforcement was weak. It's an alternative to the amber and silver alert for people who are around Delisa's age, end quote. So that's good. That's a positive. And two, or the half, Sergeant Mansell was, quote, reprimanded for his failure to act. And this is a crazy punishment. Quote, for his actions, Mansell received a 1-day suspension. A 1-day suspension. In his disciplinary hearing, he told supervisors that in hindsight, he probably should have gone ahead and sent the police. Probably. He continued, would the results have been different? Probably not, he said, end quote. Yes, the fuck they would have. Quit lying to yourself and everyone else because you know you messed up big time. Or maybe you just honestly don't care and have zero empathy. But he didn't lose his job. Of course not. In fact, he went on to be parts of even more terrible acts. Listen to this. Quote, now that same sergeant is one of 3 officers accused of a misdemeanor deadly conduct in the 2016 death of Vicky Timpa's 32-year-old son, Tony, end quote. First of all, misdemeanor and deadly conduct in the same sentence, that's, what's that saying? An oxymoron. That's an oxymoron. But this story alone is tragic and eerily reminiscent of George Floyd. An officer pinned Tony down by putting his knee into his back. After 11 minutes, Tony was unresponsive. That's a long time. The officer, Dustin Dillard, continued to keep his knee there for another 3 minutes. for a total of 14 minutes. Quote, on the footage, the officers can be heard suggesting that perhaps Timpa had fallen asleep. They began joking about waking him up for school, saying it's time for breakfast. One mimics Tony's incoherent speech while Tony lays silently on the grass. Dustin Dillard says, I hope I didn't kill him, end quote. Well, you did. But no, his actions and the police who stood by doing nothing besides make jokes were cleared of any wrongdoing. It's insane. I understand using force to get somebody under control if they're acting crazy, yada, yada, yada. But then to continuously sit there on top of them, applying who knows how much pressure. He said he couldn't breathe for 14 minutes. Mike Mata, president of the Dallas Police Association, defended his officer's action and said that it was cocaine that killed Tony, not the fact that he couldn't breathe and the physical restraint. So again, thank you, Texas, for your wonderful representation of law enforcement in America. You do us so proud. Thankfully, years later in 2023, in a civil lawsuit, Tony's son was awarded $1 million against the Dallas PD. The jury declared the officers had, quote, violated Tony's constitutional rights, but they also determined that Officers Dillard and the others were covered by qualified immunity, a law that protects government officials such as police officers from lawsuits, end quote. Why is that a thing? Make those convicted of wrongdoing pay the lawsuit, or at least portions of it. I'm sure that would deter a lot of people. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. That was much too big of a rabbit hole not to go down. This Manziel guy does not have a good track record. He's like I said, a POS. The death of Delisa is still unsolved as of this day, and no suspects have ever been named. And that, my friends, is the unsolved murder of Delisa Kelley. So unbelievably frustrating. I'll go ahead and name that owner of the Blue Mercury a suspect right now. I don't know his name. That was never released, but I think he's guy number one, right guy number two. Whew. Thank you for listening. I truly do appreciate it. And since that was such a bumper of a story, our extra little bit today after the music will be much lighter. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Whew, gotta shake that one out. Okay, this story is wild, but happy. Titled, What We Know About the Case of a Missing Boy Found Living as a Grandfather 70 Years Later, by Liam Quinn of People.com. Quote, a California boy who was lured away by a bandana-wearing woman while he played in a park in 1951 was found alive more than 70 years later and is now a grandfather living on the East Coast. Luis Armando Albino, or Albino, was just 6 years old when he vanished from a park in West Oakland, where he was playing with his brother Roger on February 21st, 1951. Luis Albino was located in part because his niece took a DNA test that led her to an uncle who hadn't been seen by his family in more than half a century. As Albino played with his brother, a woman wearing a red bandana lured him by promising to buy him candy. The AP reported that the woman spoke to the young Albino, who is of Puerto Rican descent, in Spanish. Instead of buying the boy candy, however, the woman flew him across the country to the East Coast, where he was reportedly raised by another family. At the time, the Oakland Police Department and local authorities, along with the U.S. Coast Guard and soldiers at a local army base, conducted an unsuccessful search of the California waterways, including the San Francisco Bay. See, that's how you conduct a search. Okay, Texas? Dallas, more specifically, motherfuckers. Alida Aliquin was the first to discover a sign that her long-missing uncle was still alive. In 2020, Alida decided to take an online DNA test, quote, for fun. When the test came back, it reportedly had a 22% match for a man as her uncle. Alida looked into the man at the time, but found no answers. Then in February of 2024, she and her daughters began searching again. Determined, Alida went to the Oakland Public Library and looked at a film of old Oakland Tribune articles which showed a picture of Roger and Lewis. What did I say before? Oh, rats. That's when she contacted police about opening a missing persons case. After she reported her findings to the police, the search for Albino began for the first time in many years. Then in June, Oakland police gave Alida the good news. Her uncle had been located on the East Coast. Quote, in my heart, I knew it was him, and when I got the confirmation, I let out a big, yes! Alida said, according to the Mercury News. She was reportedly told by police that Albino is a retired firefighter and Marine Corps veteran, and now a grandfather. Just days after he was found, Albino traveled to Oakland where he met his niece in person, and she then drove him to Roger's home, where the brothers reunited for the first time in 73 years. Alida said they grabbed each other and had a really tight, long hug. They sat down and just talked. Sadly, the AP reported that Roger died in August after Albino had returned for an extended visit in July. The kidnapping case remains under investigation, Oakland PD said, end quote. Oh, I'm just glad that he got there before his brother passed away. It's just heartwarming. But, Louise, tell me who your mother was. Not your bio mom, the evil bandana one who took you. Oh boy. I mean, if he does tell that the bag of beans he is about to spill, I cannot wait. Welp, I think that'll about do it for today, folksies. As always, thank you for sticking around to the very end. I really do hope you enjoy these episodes. It means a lot to do them and stuff. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you guys in a few days. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.